Alright guys, so this video took me longer to make than normal. Business has been going crazy in a good way, so I have not been able to dedicate as much time as I wanted to this YouTube channel and everything else that comes along with it. For most of the year, I have focused predominantly on length. That's been my main desire for a while now, to finally get over 9 inches. Last update, I believe I said I was a hair under 9, about 8.8 or 8.9. I was constantly growing about 1/8 an inch a month up until the point where I added vibration, growing consistently 1/8 of an inch a month. January, February, March, April, business again took off and I had to focus on that. It was not very consistent with PE. Then I went on vacation in May and had a few minor blisters where I could not do as PE as much, but I ended about 8.5 inches. Then through June and July, as many of you already know, I've been testing vibration therapy, and there's more information I'd like to give about that later on in this video, so stick around. But I've had some pretty crazy results, especially compared to my contemporaries. Again, nitpicking point later on. But I went from 8.5 to just under 9 from June and July. August rolls around. I was already having great length gains since I plan on bringing a product based off of vibration therapy to market. I wanted to test the efficacy for girth. So August was basically a side quest for girth, and it went pretty well. Now, a disclaimer, in April, I believe I measured 6 1/8 mid-shaft erect girth. When I measured again in the end of July, for consistent logging, I was down to 6 inches even. So the amount that I did gain was a bit of return to form, but I did gain new tissue on top of it. We can talk more about that in a bit. Before I go any further though, I just have a favor to ask. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this video in the algorithm and helps people that do follow my content actually see it, because the subscription feed is kind of broken. So if you could like and subscribe, that'd be great. No pressure. I don't necessarily need it, but it's YouTube, it's what you do. Now, after all that testing for girth, I was 6 inches on the dot. By the end of August, I was 6 3/16. Granted, like I already gave the caveat, I was 6 1/8 at one point, so some people could argue that it was more of a return to form, but at any rate, there was insanely fast changes with vibration therapy. I am pretty confident that the gains I made would have kept coming if I continued to practice girth-oriented PE through the rest of the year. But I am much more focused on length at the moment. I've been focusing on it for most of the year. This was literally a business need. So we're going back to length after this, but I do have a lot to talk about between vibration therapy, changes in the retention tactic, and potentially even gaining length and girth at the same time. So I got a lot written down. Buckle up. Let's get into it. 1, vibration is not all created equal. So this was news to me when I first found out. But apparently no one else is looking at the same data, besides maybe Hank, because he has a medical perspective when it comes to this vibration therapy. So I feel like I've been living in crazy town talking to people about this, because they are recommending some batshit insane stuff. And I was going off of their guidelines originally, but the more and more I learned about this, I realized I needed to kind of just go my own way, especially when they weren't looking at the same data that I was. So what I'm going off of is vibration plate therapy. You can literally walk into a Planet Fitness that has tonal body enhancement. It's basically a red light sun tanning booth, but at the bottom there's going to be a vibration pad. This can do a whole bunch of things: help with lymphatic drainage, help with collagen production, and help strengthen bones, depending on the frequency and the duration. That's what I'm going off of. That research, I have no clue what everyone else is doing. And at this point, I don't have enough care for what they're doing to even ask. But basically, the data is showing anywhere from 10 to 40 hertz has efficacy. That's the difference between a slight rumbling to an ass kicking. If we're just being practical about this, we probably don't want to be running to 40 hertz right off the bat. So I have been walking down to 20 hertz over the past month or so, and I've seen a bunch of benefits. Basically, I am getting the exact same expansion or elongation, depending what I'm doing that day with vibration plate therapy at 20 hertz, with the added benefit of not going numb. And that is very important for avoiding injuries and blisters, because if you can't feel like any discomfort, that's going to be the first sign something is wrong, right? It should feel relatively intense when doing PE. It should never hurt. If we can't feel the pain, then how are we going to ever know something is wrong? So 20 hertz as of right now is my recommended safe guideline. Some people might need less depending on their like blood vessel sensitivity. Other people need a little more depending on their collagen thickness. But 40 hertz is going to be pretty damn borderline dangerous long term from what I've been seeing. So there has been a lot of debate about where to put this damn vibrator. Some, like myself, mainly myself, which is really freaking crazy to me, vertical, along the length of the shaft, because you're going to get the best energy transfer that way. Others think, for whatever goddamn reason, this way, horizontal, because it better matches the collagen shape and whatnot. And therefore, if we're looking at this from a physics perspective, and I'm so tired of talking about this from a physics perspective because this is bioscience. But anyway, if you look at it from a physics perspective, the energy waves will travel more efficiently in the length direction. Therefore, it will cause more of a damaging effect, which is another red flag about if you're ever talking about this. But the magic from vibration plate therapy literally comes from the direct contact and transfer of kinetic energy into the tissues. It does not discriminate. That energy is going to cause havoc, whatever it comes in, no matter if the wavelengths are going this way or this way. We are talking about molecules and proteins. If that energy can interrupt the hydrogen bond even a little bit, the protein will fail. The collagen will unravel. Therefore, we get the fatigue. And additionally, the stem cells do not know what plane of axis they're on. They only know what collagen fibril they're on. So if we excite them beyond normal with this vibration therapy, it won't matter if it's coming up and down or left or right to them. They're going to get vibrated. They're going to get excited. With the transfer of energy, I already touched on this a bit. We're getting a bit of fatigue, well, a lot of fatigue in the collagen fibrils. We are getting the stem cells to get excited because they're getting rapidly stretched, and the application of energy causes the stem cells to get activated. Then, since we are vibrating the collagen fibrils, they'll be rubbing against each other, and that's going to secrete growth factors. So between just adding some kind of tension, we should get the growth stimulus from the fatigue. Then we'll get the activation response to actually produce a shit ton of proteins in the same time period. So we can talk more about this in the data, but like we can potentially see double the protein transcription in the same time frame. So the mechanical fatigue from vibration have made it next to impossible for me to not hit target elongation or expansion. And we're doing this in less than 30 minutes in most cases. 30 minutes for length, 20 minutes for girth. And just a reminder, we're supposed to be about 2% longer after the session. So between the fatigue of the collagen fibrils and the absolutely insane growth response that we get from exciting the stem cells and then secreting all the growth factors, we're seeing crazy gains, or at least I am, when we come to practicing this stuff. Now, where other vibration tactics fall short is because they are trying to copy a device that never really showed efficacy anyway, and they're still sticking to it. Putting the motor like this is not going to allow where the parts that are actually spinning, because these are just little weights on a motor, to actually transfer the energy. If you're using a 2-inch cylinder, they are literally hanging over. So they started to recommend like concrete level mixing vibrators, okay? This can shake my furniture. That's what it's designed for. This is a DIY massage chair engine. It is probably overpowered for this. I don't understand why you would need more, except when you realize that they're letting so much of that energy go to waste. They literally need something 2 to 3 times stronger just to make up for it. Not because it's not strong enough to get through the acrylic, but because they're just wasting so much of the damn energy into open space. And again, forgive me for doing a huge victory lap here. I've been debating this for months. I felt like I was crazy because I was trying to explain to him what I was doing. And essentially, I just kept getting them pushing me off, even though I was the only one showing gains from this method. And I don't know. Sorry, I just had to blow off some steam because it's been a summer, guys. So basically what I've been doing for length is 3 10-minute sets at 20 hertz of vibration extending. I will just turn off the vibrator for about a minute and then turn it back on. I do not have to worry about doing a lot of sets because the vibrations are going to basically act like fatigue sets in their own right. We are pushing so much energy into the tissue, it's kind of forced to fatigue because of how much damn energy's in the system. So don't have to worry about it when you're using the vibration extender. But if you're still not using the vibrator for good reason, it's not really proven just yet, but stick to interval length protocol. If you're using the vibrator, 3 sets, 10 minutes, you should not need to do any more PE after that. But so for Girth, what I've been doing is 10 2-minute sets, basically just doing interval pumping, 20 hertz with the vibrator. I would turn it off every 10 minutes still just to, make sure we don't have any impending nerve damage. But on paper, you do not need to do the interval pumping as well. I just noticed much less edema when I didn't just do it straight. And the problem with edema is that too much of it can lead to more of like just swelling under the skin rather than swelling in the tunica albuginea. Therefore, we're not going to actually stretch and cause girth gains that way. And just for complete transparency, I started at 40 hertz with Girth. I have worked back down to 20 hertz. Basically, what I was looking for is if I could feel the vibrations on the bottom part of my shaft. So that's how I kind of dialed in my pressure in general. So if you can't really figure out what level you want to do, start at the lowest level and slowly turn it up until it's not like bouncing like a bridge would under heavy load, but like you can just feel it on the bottom of your shaft. And that's going to basically show direct transfer at the right hertz all the way through. So one of the biggest complaints I hear about penis enlargement is that it's very difficult to start solely because there's so many opinions on the subject. That's why me and my team have designed BD's Ultimate Beginner's Guide. Essentially, it takes my 10 years of penis enlargement practice, along with the 3 years I spent researching the physiotherapy behind penis enlargement, and distills it into a book to teach you everything you need to know for the first 6 months of penis enlargement. While it is a relatively short read, you can get started day one, and it's going to be a resource that you use again and again throughout your first 6 months. If you're more into the science part of what I teach, you can check out BD's Big Book of Length and Girth Expansion Pack. Now, in the bundle, the beginner's guide is included at no cost. So if you just want to start with the 6-month guide and then learn as you go, that's probably your best bet. All this is available at peakmalphysique.com. Get a penis pump there while you're at it. Number 2, there is a new retention meta in town, and this is something I'm actually really excited about because I've been talking about this on my live streams. Those are 2 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern time, for the most part, if you want to catch those. Anyway, this past year, I've been preaching the importance for retention, but I have failed to adequately put it into my own routines until last month. Now, there has been a few changes in the past 2 months. First, I've learned about the concept of collagen reorientation or realignment. It just depends what research study you're looking off of. But when collagen is not thoroughly worked over an extended period of time, it can ruffle and meander in its shape. So think of this like a wrinkled sheet on a bed. You're going to have little peaks and divots in the sheet because it is not pulled tight. Therefore, the sheet is not covering as much of the mattress as it possibly could, right? Collagen kind of works similar to that. So what we can do is literally stretch the collagen out until it's flat and flush against the surface like you would if you're trying to smooth out a sheet for a pretty bed picture, I guess. So let's just say 2% of the collagen in our penis is in this ruffled sheet shape. That wouldn't be noticeable to us from day to day. We just think we lost a bit of size, no big deal. But if we could train that shape to be perfectly flat more often. We literally just increased our length 2% with existing tissue without having to do a crazy amount of work. Now, this is probably the reason why newbies get such fast gains at the beginning, because untrained tissues tend to not be the most optimal. Like, think about it this way. Most people are not going to be able to touch their toes right away unless they work at it constantly. It's kind of similar to the flexibility response, except the tissue just needs to be put in place rather than anything else. Now, this can also impact old heads like myself. Collagen's not going to always be formed completely flat. We can build these ridges up over time, and if we haven't particularly trained sufficiently enough, or even worse, overtrained, these ruffles are more apparent. So we need to also do this retention stuff to like maximize our current size. Now, to my Hankites. This is where Hank's thoughts on PE come in, at least some of his older thoughts. Hank was under the impression that penis enlargement is a large part like the dilation of the tunica intima. That's a little collagen ring in your heart, your aorta. Essentially, sufferers with high blood pressure would see this ring slowly expand. And if you're looking at my theory of fatigue, it makes no fucking sense how this thing grew. But this is why collagen realignment is pretty pertinent to this. So what happens is, since it's under slight pressure 24/7, the existing collagen is reshaped into a wider yet more narrow circle. So the mass stays the same, but the overall surface area has increased. So if we can combine the shape changing abilities of mild yet chronic irritation of the tissues with hypertrophy based training like I already teach, we can see the most effective possible penis enlargement tactics with just a bit more irritation throughout the day. And I'll explain how I did it. There's still other ways you can do it, but this seems to be like the most effective from at least the month that I have done it, okay? But basically, we're forcing our existing shape to be as uniform as possible. No ridges, no ruffles. And with this added dilation, we are forcing the tissues to be laid down as flat as possible so we don't even have to worry about it. So we can see like perfect, efficient growth with just a bit of added irritation throughout the day. Now, this is relative when I say a little bit of irritation. So let me get into what I've been doing. AM, 10 minutes of pumping at 7 inches of mercury, followed by 10 minutes of cock ring wear. Basically, I would get erect, put the ring on, walk away, set a timer for 10 minutes, take it off when it was done. Then midday, vibration pumping at 10 inches of mercury, 10 sets, 2 minutes. Again, cock ring on, 10 minutes. PM, 10 minutes before bed, pumping 7 inches of mercury, cock ring for 10 minutes. This led to significantly better pumps and surprisingly little edema for how much I was pumping and potentially fatiguing the tissue. But edema was variable, but I count that more to the amount of salt that I was eating and my hydration levels at the time rather than overdoing it. And potentially I was testing out different pumping pressures. Anything over 12 inches of mercury led to a lot more edema for me in particular. Now for these AM and PM sets, feeder sets that I've been calling them at the very beginning of this year, you only want to do 70% of your working pressure. So I shoot for about 10 inches of mercury for working pressure. I'm doing 7 inches of mercury for my feeder set. So if you're doing 7 inches of mercury for your starting set, or your working sets rather, your feeder sets should only be about 5 inches of mercury. We're not trying to fatigue the tissue, we're just trying to cause this dilation. So basically just want to be expanded near max size as often as possible. Now with the midday routine where I was doing 20 minutes total of pumping with vibrations, that's where we're actually trying to break down the tissue. So we're looking for about 6% expansion, or roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch, depending on your size. Now the interesting thing about wearing a cock ring right after pumping for that short 10-minute period is that the expansion stays around much longer. On paper, you could technically wear a cock ring for longer, but like I think it's going to be potentially dangerous to go longer than 20. So don't do that. But this expansion and swelling has basically stayed with me until the next pumping session. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I had such good girth gains. And on top of that, when you pump before bed, that expansion sticks around because your body is at its lowest heart rate, so it can't passively diffuse that lymphatic buildup. So since that expansion would stick around, I would have some very cumbersome morning woods that I'd have to deal with first thing in the morning. But then I'd just pump again, and it just kind of is a compounding interest almost. Now, the gist is when you're doing normal girth work before vibrations or this retention stuff, you're probably getting about 20 minutes with my workouts of being at max size. When we add in those pumping sets, we're looking at 40 minutes. And then when we add in the 30 minutes of cockring wear, we're looking at 70 minutes of total dilation. So we're basically multiplying our total time at max state by 4, which is another reason why it seems to be so effective. It's just not given a choice not to take this shape. And I'm not including the residual swell after the fact. So even if those rings are off, we're still not near our baseline flaccid shape. Therefore, our flaccid is going to get bigger as well. But in summary, since I am pumping often and not letting that expansion really leave my system, I am getting chronic expansion almost all day past baseline. And that's probably the magic point of all this retention stuff, is that you're not giving your body a choice to go back to normal. Now, I also understand this seems like a lot of work, but like think about it this way. You wake up, while you're brushing your teeth, you're pumping, and then while you're eating breakfast, you're wearing the cock ring, and then you're driving off to work. You get home from work, 20 minutes of pumping again, put on the cock ring for 10 minutes. While you're doing some chores, take it off. And then finally, when you go to bed, it's another 10 minutes of pumping, 10 minutes of cock ring under the sheet. So it's not a lot of work, but PE has to be present in your mind for a lot more of the day. So it's definitely not for everyone, but like as of right now, it seems to be what's most optimal based off of my own research. Okay, I'm being exceptionally thorough and redundant here, but for girth, I was able to go from 6 inches even to 6 3/16 with the use of vibration over 4 weeks and the addition of retention tactics. And that is what seems to be the most effective thing for me for girth at the current moment. My current routine is 10 minutes of diamond jelks. That's a tunica release. Followed by 10 minutes of feeder sets, pumping 7 inches HG. Then midday, 10 2-minute sets at 10 inches of mercury, vibrations, 10-minute sets. Just turn it off for a minute, turn it back on during your session. And then PM, 10 minutes of pumping 7 inches of mercury, the feeder set. All of this is followed by 10 minutes of cock ring or wear. I would do this for about 5 days a week. But on my off days, it would be more so active recovery. So I would still try to do the feeder sets on the off days. Again, since we're not trying to fatigue the tissues and just keep the dilation, it's not going to impact healing. And even on the active recovery days, I would wear the cock ring as well after the AM and PM sessions. So this might be heresy coming out of my mouth, but length and girth work could be feasible together. About 2 weeks into testing, I measured my erect length to see if I lost any. And I did. This is not out of the ordinary. I went down to about 8.8. So I roughly lost 2% of my length at that time, which is completely ordinary. As the tissue stiffens up, it will get this length, especially if we're constantly bloated as well. Some of that length is going to shrink down. So what I did before my midday workouts is just wear the Apex extender. That's this bad boy for 40 minutes at 8 pounds. And I didn't really worry about sets or anything like that, just keeping the tension constant at 8 pounds. And then I would do the vibration-based pumping, let's say 1 to 2 hours, because I'd normally eat breakfast after that. 1 to 2 hours after extending, that is. Like the bed sheet analogy beforehand, we were just pulling the tunica flat. But if we do end up hitting length fatigue, we technically hit the requirements for collagen production in the length department, right? So for the uninitiated, you want to be about 2% longer after sessions. So that's going to be between like 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, depending how long you are. So after doing Apex 2-hour break, vibration pumping, I would be exceptionally large. And it was, again, this was a lot like compounding interest. I would be bigger and bigger each day, at least when in the pump and immediately after. And so after 2 weeks of doing it this style, I was 9 1/8 inches bone pressed erect length. So I actually overshot my initial length from before doing the girth work and that initial retraction. So again, we're going to go through the routine real quick. AM feeder set of pumping, AM apex extender 40 minutes straight at 8 pounds of tension. Midday, we're doing interval pumping with vibrations, already laid out the protocol there. Feeder set of pumping in the PM, cockring retention after all pumping sessions. And this is where most guys could not pull off this much work. We're talking 80 minutes of PE. That gets pretty cumbersome when you're not a single guy or literally don't do PE for a living. I have the investment of making my dick as big as possible so I can make literally more money off my dick. It makes sense to me to devote this much time to it during the day. Most guys probably shouldn't, and that's why I still recommend separating length and girth. Makes it much more feasible long term, but you are welcome to prove me wrong. If you can gain length and girth with vibrations doing something similar, tell me about it. I'd love to hear it. I'm going to wrap this video up, which is still probably going for another 5 minutes, with what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the year, more than likely. I'm still going to be focusing on length. Basically, the routine is going to be still AM and PM feeder sets for pumping with the cockring. Granted, for the past couple days, I've been relatively bad about doing that. Extending with vibrations at 20 hertz, around 8 pounds of tension. I'm probably going to slowly bring that back up to about 10 to 12 pounds by the end of the year. And then potentially 10 minutes of pumping post extender wear, and then putting the cockring on afterwards. Or it's more so that I don't really have the time to fit that into my schedule as well, but we shall see if I can pull it off. And again, any session will be wearing a cockring afterwards because we're trying to keep that dilation. Now finally, tracking my progress. Remember, I caught RSV like end of the year. So between that and being a bit of a fat fuck, my erections, bone pressed erect length were about 8 1/4. And I was flirting with 8.4 by March. But I lost size in April because of not being able to do PE because of business. And then by May, I got up to 8.5. I added vibrations in June through July. June, I was 8.75. July, I was just at 9 inches bone pressed erect. And then while I practiced girth through August, I somehow gained an additional 1/8 of an inch of length, putting me at 9 1/8 inches long bone press. I'm gonna throw some numbers at you, more so than I already did. Okay, my average gain rate without vibrations was 1.2%. With vibrations, it was 2.25%. And this included the girth focus shift away from length. So if we're looking at just practice, if we're just looking at data from just the length stuff, I was 2.5% longer every month, literally over doubling what I was doing without vibrations. So while direct vibration tactics or therapy, whatever you want to call it, is still in its infancy, pairing it with this retention theory is really taking my gains to the new level. Using Excel and its auto calculations, it has me a hair under 10 by December. While I highly doubt that 9.5 inches by December is definitely on the table. I will obviously keep you guys in the loop as I do this stuff, but I'm extremely busy with business stuff and I'm trying to do a lot of other things for this channel. So it might be a while since you'll see an update. I'll try to have one in November and then again in January 2025 to really just wrap this entire thing up. So I hope you enjoyed this. I do kind of hope I pissed a few people off with this one. But if you like this content, like and subscribe to my channel. That'd be great. No pressure though. I will see you in the next one, hopefully.